What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Best Mountain Farm. And today we are in the old barn loft slash woodworking shop that I'm hoping to get cleaned up for Papa Hugh and myself to have more room to use here soon. But there's still enough space to work, so it's a pretty day. But here in a couple days it's supposed to be cold and snowing. So in anticipation of that, I am going to get some trim, hopefully most all of the trim, for the farmhouse living room, the back farmhouse living room, and get that made so when it's nasty out I have something to do and I don't have to freeze out here trying to get stuff made. And it is so wet from the rain we've had that doing anything else on the farm with a tractor, even with a four-wheel drive tractor, is almost impossible and just rips everything up really bad. So I have my stack of old oak that I have been saving for years and years. It's been cut for about 30 years. Got it from a friend of mine and waiting to do something with it that would be perfect, and I think that trim will be perfect. So I'm going to start right here with this, and you can see being stacked up in the specific place it was for some reason. The termites got right in this spot, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this piece in half. That's going to make it a lot easier to work with. All right, now I've got the termite damage cut out. So since all this oak is rough cut, none of the edges are anywhere near what they need to be to make trim out of. So I'm going to use my aluminum bar here that I use for a straight edge. And all we're going to do is set this up as a jig for the skill saw so that I can make one nice straight line, and then I'll be able to run it through the table saw with the fence. So let's get started on setting this thing up. All right, so what I did was I measured the distance from the edge of my guard here to the blade, which is right at 1 1/8 inch. Then I used some clamps and I made sure that nowhere along the edge of this board was less than 1 1/8. And in some places where the board has a bow, it's 1 1/4. And then it goes back away to about 1 1/8 of an inch. So what this is going to do is allow me to set my table or set my skill saw up and get very minimum waste, because you can't really want to run a crooked board through a table saw really straight. You can, but it's really a pain in the butt. So I'm doing it this way so I can get the maximum width that I need out of these boards. All right, so I reversed. I wasn't getting quite the cut I wanted, so I reversed the long side so I could have more surface area. Set the whole skill saw on here, and also put a clamp right here to keep the piece from moving. So that should give me a lot nicer cut. This cut wasn't bad, but someone putting a round over on these, and they're for trim. I really want it to be as close to perfect as I can get it. So let's see what happens here. All right, that worked out much better. Now I've got a nice straight line, and you can see I had just minimal waste depending on where this board was bowed. So now I can go over here, get the table saw set up, and start cutting it down into my dimensional sizes I want. Okay, so GoPro definitely decided to be a pain in my butt and lost some of the footage, which is okay because now I'm going to get started back where it started to sputter on me, and we are going to get this done, and I'll be able to show you start to finish a piece from where the GoPro cut out. So I have my, you can see I have my straight edge set up here. And I have a clamp here that holds both pieces down, and then I have clamps here that hold the straight edge to our piece of oak. I have it set up now so I can run the whole piece with the max amount of my skill saw setting on the piece of wood, and I'm going to need to come this direction because the GoPro was hitting, stand was hitting where I needed the skill saw to run. So now we're going to trim this up and see how straight of an edge I can get with the least amount of waste. All right, so I'm probably going to have to fire up the electric skill saw and get a better blade for it, because you heard that battery was trying to suck down. This oak is extremely hard. Now you can see I only have maybe not even an 1/8 inch of waste, but as we get to the center, because of the bow on the board, bigger, up around 1/4 of an inch, but then at the other end back down to about 1/8 of an inch. So by using my skill saw and this straight edge, I was able to get a nice straight line here to start running it through the table saw without having much waste. So now we can go over to the table saw and get started, or excuse me, now we can go over to the planer and we can get started on getting it flat. All right, so instead of going first through the planer, I am having a little bit of change of plans. Got my straight edge here, and you can see that I'm not quite as perfectly square as I wanted to be. It's not horrible. It's definitely better than it was. The way it was to begin with, it would have taken multiple passes to go through the joiner to get this edge perfectly straight. So what I'm talking about when I say the joiner, so this is a joiner, and the planer will not get a board perfectly square because it puts pressure down on the piece of wood that you're planing. So it will get it flat, but it won't get it square, because as soon as it goes to the plate, as soon as it goes through the blades, all the down pressure from the rollers, it's going to spring right back into the position it was. The only difference is it's going to be a nice smooth surface. Now the joiner, when you start running that, you don't really put any pressure through it. It passes over these knives right here, and there we go. Those knives right there, which I'm not going to pull all the way up, I don't want to get cut. And I just go nice and smooth, especially on the edge. And so after one, with this being as close as it is, probably after one pass, I'm gonna have a nice, perfectly straight edge to then pass through the table saw and have two good square edges. Especially, you know, this is off just maybe a 1/16 of an inch, but once I start doing my round over for the trim, it's going to be very noticeable. So we're going to go ahead and get this plugged in and run the joiner over one edge. All right, so once again, the GoPro decided to be annoying, but that's okay. I did run it through the our joiner here, and you can see that now when I use the straight edge, that is much tighter fit, like it is now square. But the problem is, because this side wasn't flat to set flush up against the joiner, it's off at an angle even though it's flat. So I'm gonna go ahead and run one side through the planer, then I can show you the joiner again and go from there. All right, so before we even get started, I want you to take a look at this piece of wood and what it looks like right now. That way you have something to compare it to after we run it through the planer. All right, now you can see a difference. This is such beautiful wood. Really is gorgeous. And I'm not even going to stain this because it's so pretty. I'm just going to put a urethane on it and when I do that, it's going to come out just a little bit darker. I think it'll be perfect, the light colored wood with the darker gray and blue I have in the living room. So now that I have one side flat, I can get everything set back up and get a good joint. All right, now you can see with it sitting up against the fence here, it's much straighter. There we go. With it sitting nice and flat, that is a good, nice flat corner that can now be against our rail or our fence here and give us a good straight line. So at this point, with one side planed and one side joined, it's 2 square. So it's square on this side and this side. So it's square on 2 sides. The next piece that I cut will be 3 square. And that's a good starting place for pretty much any kind of furniture or stuff that you're doing that you don't need all 4 sides totally square. So I'll run this through the table saw and I'll show you why that is considered 3 square and what that means. Alright, so this is our first 3 squared 3-inch piece. And the reason that this is 3 squared is because I ran it through the planer, so it's flat on this side, and then I ran it through the joiner and then the table saw. So now, in theory, I'm square from here to here and from here to here. And in order for this to be 4 square all the way around, I would now need to run this side through the joiner. That'd be truly 4 square. I would have ran this board through the joiner at the very beginning. One pass on the joiner long ways, one pass on the joiner short ways, one pass through the planer on the other rough side, and then one pass through the table saw creates a true 4 square piece of dimensional lumber. Now, the reason I don't do the 4 square on the joiner, the wide side on the joiner start, is because we only have this 5-inch joiner. Actually, I think it might be 6-inch joiner. To really do any good, you need an 8 or a 12-inch joiner to be able to flatten anything 6 inches or over, especially right at 6 inches, which is your most useful size when building furniture or making anything. I don't have the money for an 8-inch joiner yet. Something I'm looking, I'll get secondhand because I want a big heavy duty one, and I'll get it used from somebody. And then I will be able to make true 4 square lumber. But being that this is trim, it's not going to matter because anything that's not square here on the back side will be up against the wall, and by nailing it, it's going to pull this nice and flat. So 3 square is going to be just fine for our trim. So I've got my 3-inch piece here. Now I'm going to go through, if I pushed it, reset the table saw to 2 inches, and then I'll have my 2-inch piece and my 3-inch piece. Okay, so the last step for our trim is going to be our roundovers. And because it is an old farmhouse, I'm keeping everything simple. I've simply got an 1/8 inch roundover bit for the molding for the ceiling. Not crown molding, just the trim for the ceiling. Obviously one side's gonna be left square and I'm gonna round over. For the picture board, I'm gonna round over both sides. And again, I didn't need to completely plane and get the backside flat, just the front, because the backside is going to be up against the wall. So let's get the generator fired back up, and we're going to get our roundovers, and then we'll have a couple finished pieces. All right, so you can see the difference. There is one finished piece of picture molding and one finished piece of very simplistic crown molding, I guess you could say. You can see how it's not square. You can see that bow down there on the end, but that's not going to matter because I'm going to be nailing it up to the wall. But to put it in perspective, I started with that and ended with that. So unless you really know what you're looking at, it's very hard to get a full feeling for what the wood will look like when it's finished. That's one of my favorite things, is taking a piece of rough lumber, beat up lumber, and seeing how pretty it's going to be once it's finished. And this isn't even some of the prettiest wood in this pile. This is actually white oak. There's some red oak and black oak, and I think that's really going to add something to the old farmhouse with the trim. You know, it'll be slightly different, but it'll work. Really excited. So now I have 2 finished pieces. I have 7 foot of each piece. I need a total of 70 feet of each, as well as about 40 feet of window casing and door casings. So basically this entire stack that's right there, I've now got to set up and get it all finished. But I want to show you guys on the video how I go about making this. So now it's just going to be a matter of just running an assembly line. Cut it down to a manageable length. Cut, join, or cut, plane, join, 3 square, and round over. And the reason that I will do, everything has to be done at once. So I'll cut the one edge, and first, then I'll plane. Every single piece will pass through the planer before I ever adjust it. And that way I know I want to have a very uniform thickness, because everything gets planed all in order. So I'll just start with the first piece, second piece, third piece, all the way through. Some of them may not even touch. And then I'll adjust the planer, run it all through in order, start to finish. And I'll continue doing that so that every piece is the exact thickness. And then I will continue on with my joining and cutting everything into 2-inch and 3-inch pieces of trim. Then I will set it up, and probably set it up on the router table in order, just for expediency, and run everything through on the router table and get everything finished up. But that's a total of 140 pieces of trim. And I probably, down on the baseboards, I don't really care too much. We did save all the old baseboards, and actually they're over there. Probably with the baseboards, all I will do is run them through the planer lightly, and just stain them to match the oak as best as I can, because they're going to be down the ground getting kicked, dogs making them dirty and all that. So I don't think I'll worry about the oak on the baseboards. If it doesn't look right and I can't get the match, then I'll do the baseboards as well. Might even just paint them. Just paint the baseboards the darker color that's on top. That's probably what I will do. That will add some height to the walls. That's how my brain works. I just make so much extra work for myself, but it's okay. It always turns out fantastic in the end, even though if the end might be 2 months over what I anticipated. That's the life of an artist. So anyway, folks, make sure and like, subscribe, and share, so that you can see the rest of the work and the trim going up, and hopefully see the finished living room here very shortly. And I am going to probably call it a night. Another project, I gotta get a hold of power company, because I want to get actual power down to this barn so that we can run all of our equipment without having to run the generator. Be much more pleasant in here. Hopefully this summer I'll be able to get that done for Papa. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.